Industrial gas explosions, they aren't just random, chaotic accidents. They're actually precise mathematical recipes that we can actively break. Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the actual physics of hazardous areas. We're going to look at exactly when a gas cloud becomes a bomb and how international standards are specifically designed to stop it. So, the foundational rule of hazardous areas is what we call the fire triangle: fuel, oxygen, and an ignition source. These three things have to show up to the exact same party at the exact same time for an explosion to happen. If you miss even one of them, absolutely nothing happens. That simple logic literally dictates every safety rule you will ever apply in a facility. Now, our safety systems translate that fire triangle into actual engineering practices by kind of tackling it from different angles. Area classification, that aggressively hunts down the fuel, mapping out exactly where explosive gas is likely to be. X-rated electrical design, on the flip side, aggressively attacks the ignition source. It removes the arcs, the sparks, and the hot surfaces from those mapped areas. And you might be wondering, well, why not target the oxygen? Because especially offshore or out in the open air, oxygen is just always there. You can't engineer away the air we breathe, so we have to meticulously control the other two. But here's the catch. Fuel and air don't just explode at any random ratio. There's a very specific window. And this brings us to the lower explosive limit, or the LEL. Think of the LEL as the absolute floor of the danger zone. Below the specific concentration, the mixture is simply too lean. There just isn't enough flammable gas mixed into the air to actually catch fire. On the exact opposite end of the spectrum, we have the upper explosive limit, or UEL. If the LEL is the floor, the UEL is the ceiling. Above this concentration, the mixture is too rich. The space is literally so choked with flammable gas that it's pushed out all the oxygen. And without enough oxygen for combustion, a spark in that environment won't do a thing. So, what does this all mean? The crucial takeaway here is that ignition only propagates within that specific mathematical sweet spot, trapped directly between the LEL and the UEL. Below it, you're safe because it's too lean. Above it, you're technically safe from an immediate spark because it's too rich. The actual danger is entirely confined to that explosive range right in the middle. To make this invisible gas physics instantly relatable, let's just think about building a campfire. If you have just one or two tiny twigs and a massive gust of wind, your fire won't catch, right? That's a mixture below the LEL. It's too lean. Now imagine you dump an entire truckload of heavy logs directly onto a tiny spark, packing it so tight no air can get in. It completely smothers. It's starved of air, which is exactly like a gas mixture above the UEL. It's only when you have that perfect, well-ventilated balance of logs and airflow that you get a roaring, sustained fire. A gas cloud works exactly the same way. But here is where we run into a massive and honestly counterintuitive trap. According to the IEC 6007910 standard, people very often incorrectly assume that a highly concentrated gas environment, one that's above the UEL, is automatically safe. But the standard explicitly warns us that while it isn't explosive at that exact second, it can readily become so. Why is that? Because any dilution with fresh air drags that rich mixture straight back down into the danger zone. Imagine a tank entirely filled with rich gas way above the UEL. The moment someone opens a hatch or a draft of wind hits it, fresh oxygen rushes in. That air dilutes the rich gas, dragging the concentration straight down through that deadly explosive band on its way to becoming lean. Let's test this out with a quick check. It's a highly common situation at petroleum facilities and offshore rigs. Imagine a tank is venting rich vapor, a concentration well above its UEL, directly out into the open air. Based on what we just covered, would you say the area immediately around that vent is safe, or is it hazardous? If you guessed hazardous, you hit the nail on the head. As that rich, over the UEL gas hits the open atmosphere, it rapidly mixes with the surrounding air. It dilutes. And as it dilutes, it has to pass directly through that sweet spot between the LEL and UEL before it can completely dissipate. That's exactly why the area immediately around the vent is classified as a hazardous Zone 1, and it's surrounded by a Zone 2 area. The standards strictly assume that dilution will inevitably create an explosive atmosphere. Take an inadequately ventilated building housing process equipment, for instance. If you have a roof vent expelling gas, the interior of that vent piping is classified as Zone 1. Even if the gas inside that pipe is incredibly rich and way above the UEL, it's classified as a severe hazard. Why? Because it is actively being expelled into the outside air, where it will unavoidably mix, dilute, and become explosive. You simply cannot ignore the dilution factor. Okay, let's lock in the core physics that dictate how every single piece of X-rated equipment is built and how every hazardous zone map is drawn. Number one, an explosion absolutely demands fuel, oxygen, and ignition simultaneously. Number two, the mixture will only ignite if it sits perfectly in that danger window between the LEL and the UEL. And number three, the ultimate trap. Never ever assume a too rich gas is safe, because the moment it hits fresh air, it dilutes straight into a potentially catastrophic hazard. So we now know exactly when gas will explode based on its concentration. But to truly map a hazardous facility, you have to know how the gas behaves once it escapes. So I'll leave you with this. Once that gas is released, where does it actually go? Does it shoot straight up, pool on the ground, or drift sideways? The answer relies entirely on vapor density, and it changes absolutely everything about where we place our equipment. We're going to solve that puzzle in our next explainer.